Alright, what's going on guys? So the Game Post just released an article here. Destiny 2 Edge of Fate launches with lowest Steam peak player count in history. This is an article from Zuhad Ali. Go check this out if you want to, I will leave the link down below. But he says here, despite strong story reception, Destiny 2 The Edge of Fate has hit the lowest day 1 peak player count on Steam since the game moved onto the platform. Destiny 2's newest expansion, The Edge of Fate, officially launched yesterday, kicking off the start of a brand new Fate saga, following the conclusion of the final shape. The launch day had hardly any technical hiccups. Players were able to log in and play almost immediately, no long queues, no server crashes. Compared to past launches, this was pretty smooth. And to be fair, the launch was pretty smooth. We did have no error codes. I pretty much got into the game instantly with no login queue. So when you compare this to the final shape and Lightfall, there were just constant crashes, constant error codes, and you were just sat in a login queue for hours. It was literally unplayable. But the Edge of Fate launch, completely smooth. But anyway, he goes on to mention the Edge of Fate Steam player count, and according to the live tracker apps on Steam database, Edge of Fate reached a day 1 peak of 99,193 concurrent players on Steam. That is the lowest launch day peak for Destiny 2 expansions since the game moved onto Steam back in 2019. So comparing this to the other expansions, Shadowkeep had 214,000, Beyond Light had 242k, Witch Queen had 290k, Lightfall had 316k as the all-time high, and Final Shape got 314k, which would have been higher if there wasn't constant error codes and bugs. So you could argue that the game was just constantly growing year after year, and then just instantly had a drop down to 99k with the Edge of Fate. I think the majority of people just had enough of the game and just said that Final Shape was their exit. They'd done the 10-year story and had just called it quits there, which I do think is fair enough. It was a perfect time to just finish and leave the game, but I think the Edge of Fate was also the perfect time to get back into the game, especially as a new player. But he does go on to mention that there are a few reasons behind the player drop. The first is that the Edge of Fate marks the beginning of a whole new saga in Destiny 2, the first new saga since 2014. It doesn't have the same kind of build-up momentum that Final Shape did, which wrapped up a 10-year story arc. A lot of players saw that natural endpoint and just stepped away. There's also the general mood around Bungie right now, after the last year's layoffs and ongoing community frustrations with monetization and communication. Many long-time players have simply lost interest or trust. Backing this up, a recent analysis using emblem tracking data suggests that pre-orders for the Edge of Fate were down nearly 50% compared to the final shape. That kind of drop is massive and definitely shows up in the launch day numbers. And yeah, I can definitely agree with this. I just think that hype for the Edge of Fate just wasn't there compared to Final Shape and even Lightfall. I think Lightfall had the biggest hype, not just because of the new subclass and that it felt like a true endgame experience coming, but the build up towards Lightfall was just so real. And I think when they announced the Final Shape, obviously we didn't have a new subclass, and initially we didn't even have Prismatic, so it just didn't feel that exciting. And then we eventually had Into the Light drop as a free-to-play DLC, and then they also came out and announced the Prismatic subclass, a bunch of new supers, and a ton of overhauls, including having like the exotic class items, and I think that really hyped up the DLC a lot more. So it felt like the Final Shape was that endgame experience that we needed. And then after that happened, it just felt like the game was dead. Like we had episode echoes, we had Revenant, we had Heresy, which don't get me wrong, Heresy was really good. But during that whole year, they didn't really announce much of the next expansion, and I feel like that was their biggest mistake. Not announcing what's coming next to Destiny 2, other than just a few changes of quality of life, nothing really to do with the DLC and the story that we're going to be getting. So because of that, I think that's why the numbers are this low. And honestly, I don't think these numbers are going to improve anytime soon. I think with the day 1 raid coming out, I think we will have a higher player count than we did with launch day, but I still don't think that this is enough to really bring players back. I think what we really need now is a Destiny 3 and not just a continuation of Destiny 2, because I think all the people that used to play are just gone and they don't have any interest in coming back to Destiny 2. So if they bring out a Destiny 3, I think that would really shake up the Destiny franchise and not only bring in new players but possibly bring in returning players who did quit. I think there's just far too much stuff in the game, so much useless stuff. Like we've got thousands of weapons and armor, and most of it now is irrelevant since we have tier 5 weapons and armor 3.0. But don't get me wrong, the game is changing quite rapidly. There are a lot of good changes that have happened, but also a lot of changes that people dislike. You're never going to please everyone, that's just how it is. And despite how good the expansion does get, because the Edge of Fate was pretty good, I'm not going to lie, I just don't think there's anything that Bungie can physically do to bring more players back to the game or get new players into the game. I just think a fresh start is needed to boost up that player number again, and I think that moving on, every expansion now is just going to be like a season with diminishing players, and the player count is just going to get lower and lower to the point where the game will no longer be financially sustainable. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you next time.